Friends, welcome to Cyberscriptus. In today's session, we are going to learn about Python functions. Now, functions are a very important part of any programming language, and you cannot have any programming language without functions. And most probably, you won't be writing any important program or any professional program without the use of these functions. So let's just go ahead and look at what are functions. So function is a code of block of code which runs only when it is called. So basically, function is something that is a block of code you may have written or somebody may have written and you are just importing it, but then it executes only when you call it. You can pass data or parameters into a function and it returns you data as a result. So basically, you pass on one or more inputs and you get one or more outputs out of it. Think of it as a black box, right? So there is a black box. You put certain inputs into it and give you certain outputs. So that is what it is, a function is. So if I want to map it to a real world example, think of, let's say I have a manufacturing factory and I'm manufacturing cricket balls. Now I am manufacturing the balls, but I don't have the facility to color it. So I outsourced it. So what I told the outsource company, what I give them the ball that I have made. I tell them the color that the ball needs to be white or red or pink. And the third thing I might give them is the brand name that I want to get it printed on it. And then they take these three inputs and they do whatever they want to or whatever that is needed to be done. And then finally they would return me a colored ball. So I have given them three inputs: ball, type of the color, I want red, white, pink, and the brand name. And what they do is they process the ball and they color it and give it back to me. So that is a very common real world example. So if I give you an example in terms of programming language, you already have used functions. So we already use print function many times. So what you do basically, you give it a string and it prints it out. Now you don't know what's happening behind and you don't care about it, right? Because when you use print, you don't need to understand how it is implemented. The only thing you care is, okay, if I give it a string, it will print it on the standard output. But if you look at the code of print statement has 120 lines of code implemented in C language. So actually print statement is implemented in C language. And it has 120 lines of code because it does a lot of error checking and it also needs to take off printing hex codes or Unicode characters, different other type of characters. So it has to take a lot of things into consideration. So that is what a function is. Function is a block of code. You give it input and it gives you output. So this is the structure of function. How does it look like? So it starts with basically a keyword def. Then you have functional function name, and then you have optional list of parameters, and then you have indented block of code. You can have local variables inside function. For example, this sum is a local variable. Then you have return value. So if your function is expected to return something, then you will have a return statement. And then this is how you call it actually from your main Python program. So you call the name of the function and pass the parameters. So when you pass the parameters while calling, they are called arguments. And when you are defining a function, they are called parameters. So this is an example of a Python program on the left hand side. So it starts with a equal to 2, b equal to 3, and it goes serially this way. Now somewhere I have a function called c equal to sum a and b. And this is the definition of my function. So what actually happens is you can assume that the code from the function is executed after your call to the function. So when I call c equal to some ab, actually what is happening is I'm executing this total equal to 0, then p plus q is done, and this return, the total is returned, and that total is assigned to c. So all this red part is happening without you knowing it. So this is how a function works. Now let's go to a PyCharm and see how exactly it is implemented. So what we would do is basically we would create a new Python file. Let's name it as functions, my functions. So let's just define a basic function. So it starts with keyword year, then the name of the function, right? This rounded brackets, and then print. So this is a very basic function if you look at it. No parameters are passed, and I'm just having a print statement. Now let's just call it. So if you just define a function, nothing would happen. So if I execute this program, my functions, see nothing would happen because the function doesn't do anything unless it is called. Now let's call it. So how do you call it? You just write the name of the function and this rounded brackets. That's it. See now the function is called, and as soon as it is called, this line gets executed. And what does it do? It just print test okay. Now let's say if I do print basic function, what would happen? See now it is printing. Let me comment this. See now you are getting two lines. One is test okay and the other is none. So what is happening here? Say I call this function. As soon as I call this function, all the code in the function would get executed. And the only line we have is print test okay. So the first line that you are saying that is coming from the basic function. Now here we don't have any return statement. That's why the function returns none and the none is printed. Now let's say if I do return, if I return something, that will print high. So if you don't return anything, none is returned from the function, and that gets printed by the print statement. Let's move ahead. Let's write a function with parameters. So let's say this is my greet function, and now I'm having parameters. See, in the earlier function, we didn't have any parameters, but now I'm passing a parameter, and what I'm doing is whatever name you pass, I'm just going to greet that person. Now let's call this function. It's greet, and let's pass the parameter Python. So what we will get? So as soon as this function is called, this code would get executed. And this Python is assigned to this variable name, right? You get good morning Python. I hope you're fine. So I hope you understood the parameters. Let's take one more example. Let's write a function that tells you if a number is odd or even, right? Is even, you can pass any value. And now what I'm doing is I'm defining a local variable, a Boolean variable. Now, next thing I'm doing is I'm checking if each instance value comma int. So first thing is if I need to check if it is odd or even, it has to be integer. If it is not integer, then there is no point in checking it, right? Now if it is integer, then I'm checking that if value mod 2 is equal to 0. If it is 0, then what I'm doing is I'm setting return value to true. And if it is not integer, then we don't need to do anything. And we just need to return. So what are we doing here? We are taking one parameter. Next thing we are doing is we are creating a local variable RET value, return value, and setting it to false. Now, if the instance of value is integer, then only we check it if it is odd or even, and if it is even, we set it to true. Now let's just call it and see what happens. So I'm saying print is even 3, and then print is even 2. Let's see now what happens. So first we got false. Reason is this 3 is instance of integer, and when it try to execute this line, 3 mod 2 is not equal to 0. That's why. Even if I pass a string here, it would give me false. Reason being, this is not getting true. So whatever is in return value is written as is. Now, most of the time, what happens is somebody else write the function and the other person uses it. I have seen some organizations where you have API development team that write this function, and then the junior developers uses them. So if that is the case, then you need to provide some documentation into your function so that the other person can understand what are the parameters that are coming in, what is the output that we are generating. So to help somebody who wants to use your function, you can put docstring into your functions and how it is done. So you start with 3 single quotes or double quotes, and then I can write my docstring here. So what I am trying to do is, for example, first I want to put version number, then I want to write a small string that tell that number is odd or even. The input is int and output is boolean. And it also mentions who has written this function, and you can have something like, so this is how you provide your docstring. Now, how is it going to help the other person who wants to use your function? So what he can do is if I do print and I say is even dot doc. Now, if I print this thing in my function, it would give me the entire doc string. So you can try this with any function. So if I do with print dot doc, so it will give me doc string for print. Now what print does? So this is print. What are the input that it can take? What it does? What are the inputs? What are the output? What is AND? What is separator? What is so entire thing it is giving you. The other way to access this is help function. So if I say help and if I try is even function name, I get the same thing. So if somebody prints underscore underscore doc, or if he uses help function, then he would get this string and it would help the person who wants to use your function that what kind of inputs this function expects and what is the output it would be giving you. See, in some other languages like Java and C, what happens is you have to specify the type. So here in Java or C, if you're writing this kind of function, you have to tell what kind of parameter is this integer or what. But in Python, it's not like that. So it is very difficult for anybody to understand what inputs you can pass to your function. So that's where this doxing is very helpful. Now let's look at some. Now let's look at the parameters that are passed to the function. So let's look at mandatory arguments. Mandatory or positional arguments. So let's say I have a function called mandatory arguments, and I want to pass x, y, and z. So this is the definition of a function. Let's just go ahead and only print this thing. So I say x is equal to x, y is equal to y, and z is equal to z. Let's say mandatory argument 100 comma 5 comma test. So what happens is it prints these things. Now why these are called mandatory arguments? So if you have three arguments like this, you have to pass all the three arguments. You cannot skip anything and they have to be in order. So first argument would always be assigned to x, second argument is always assigned to y, and third would always be assigned to z. And if you skip anything, Python would give you error. Let's see, missing one required positional argument. So if you have three positional argument, you will have to pass all the three arguments. You cannot skip anything. Now let's say another kind of argument. They are called keyword arguments. So let's say def and I say keyword or mixed arguments. Now in mixed argument, what I'm doing is I have this x, y, and z. But on top of that, I have two more arguments. Right? A and let's say B is a boolean. Right? Now let's just go ahead and print them as well. So, A is equal to B is equal to B. Now, if I say mixed argument 1 comma 2 comma 3, let's see what happens. Oh, we have to add third argument. So now you see here we are asking for five arguments, five parameters, and but we are supplying only three, but it is working. The reasoning, these are called keyword arguments. So when I say a equal to some string, so if you pass a, then it is fine. It will take it up. Otherwise, this is the default value. So you see this some string and false. Now here I can say mixed arguments is equal to 1 comma 2 comma 3. Now I pass new string and here I am passing true. So now what happens is, see a is equal to new string now because now we are passing. In the earlier example, we are passing only 3. So it was taking default value of a. So if you don't pass keyword argument, that's fine. It would take the default value. So, but it is not mandatory. Let's say I have said b equal to false. That means b is a boolean. So this is just a default value. You can pass anything you want. So for example, if I say mixed argument 1 comma 2 comma 3, then I say new string. And here I'm not passing boolean, I'm passing a list. Let's say I have this is a list. So see b is equal to the new list that we have passed. So if you have keyword argument and you say a equal to some string, it doesn't mean that you have to pass only strings for a. You can pass any object and it will take it up. But if you don't pass anything, then it will take the default one. Now, what if you don't want to pass A, but you want to pass B? How do you do it? So I don't want to pass this part, but I want to pass value for B. Now, in such case, what you can do is, see, these are my three positional arguments, and they would be assigned 1 to x, 2 to y, 3 to z. But now I don't want to pass anything for A. So what I can do is I can directly write like this. I'm writing B is equal to 4, 5, 6. So now what happens is 1 would be assigned to X, 2 would be assigned to Y, 3 would be assigned to Z. And now, since you have mentioned B equal to this, B would be assigned that list and A would be default. So it has to be comma. Sorry. So now you see X is 1, Y is 2, Z is 3. We have not passed anything into A. But if you want to skip keyword argument, then you have to mention the name of the parameter here. Now, let's take one more use case wherein you don't want to pass 1, 2, 3 in the order. So that is also possible. What you can do is you can specify like this. So I want to pass y first. So I can say y equal to 1, x is equal to 5, and z is equal to, let's say, 6. Rest two are not mandatory because they are keyword arguments. Right? You see, since I passed x equal to 5, it was assigned to x. So we can interchange the order of positional argument, but if you want to do that, you have to specify which one is which. So I have to specify y equal to 1, x equal to 5 if I want to interchange order of x and y. Now, we saw that the keyword arguments are not mandatory. But what if you want to make keyword arguments as mandatory? So if you want to do that, let's write another function called keyword arguments. Now, if I want to make keyword argument is mandatory, I can specify special symbol star. And now I see A and B. Now what happens here? Here X and Y are mandatory and they are positional arguments. And A and B also are mandatory now, but they are keyword arguments. So for example, if I say 1 comma 2, then sorry, let us just print it first. Now let's call this function keyword arguments. Now finding 1 comma 2 because X and Y are positional arguments and they are mandatory. So we are passing it, but I'll get an error that there are two required keyword only arguments. So these are keyword only arguments, but they are mandatory. So this function, this program would always give me error unless I specify A is equal to high, maybe B equal to 100. So A and B both I have to pass and they have to be passed as keyword arguments. The order is not important. I can say B and A, but as soon as you put a star, the rest of the arguments becomes keyword arguments and they are mandatory. Now let's make one more change here. I make this as keyword argument. Now what happens? See, X is a positional argument and is mandatory. Y is a keyword argument and because we already provided default value, it is not mandatory. A and B are keyword arguments and are mandatory. So I can skip 2 here now. So X would be assigned 1. We are not passing anything for Y and A and B are passed. So you see now X equal to 1, Y is equal to my string and A and B are printed. So this is how you can define a function depending on your requirements. Now let's look at unpacking. So unpacking arguments. Let's put it in my def unpack here yes and x comma y comma z comma t is equal to 1. Let's say these are my arguments. Let's just go and print them. Let's see now what happens. So I'm getting this x equal to 1, y equal to 2, z equal to 3, and t is equal to 1 because t is a keyword argument and we have provided default value. Now let's say you have a list and list has three values 4, comma 10, comma string. Now if you have a list like this, you can pass this list to function. So what I can say is unpack argument star my list. So now what happens is whatever you have in list that becomes comma separated arguments to my unpack function, and they would be printed. Now let's see what happens. See now what has happened, x equal to 4, because your list has 4, 10 and string. So 4, then y has become 10, z equal to string, and t is equal to 1. Let's say I have 4 arguments. Then now t would become 100, because now I'm passing 4 arguments. What if I make it 5? Or more if you have more number of items in list than your parameters in your function, then it would give error. So you should have exactly same number of elements in the list as you have your parameters in the function. Another way to do it is, let's say you have a dictionary. Let's say I have a dictionary like this: x colon 100, y colon 25, colon z colon new string. And now, if you have a dictionary wherein the variable name exactly matches the keyword of the dictionary, and then you have some value, then such dictionary can be directly passed to your function using double star. So what happens now? Or it has to be double quotes. One more method returns an argument. Oh, sorry, it has to be the name of the dictionary. My bad. Okay, so now you see. So if you have a list with exactly same number of elements as your argument, you can pass this list using single star. Or if your dictionary with the keys of the dictionary matching the names of the variables, then you can also use it. But if I do it like this will give me an error. So the names have to be matched exactly as per the arguments list you have. Let's see one more example. Let's say we have, you don't know how many arguments will be passed to your functions. So let's say variable number of args. Let's say I don't know how many. For example, I want to write a function that provides sum of list of values or product of sum of values, right? And I don't know how many numbers would be passed to my function. In that case, I can use star value. One example is your print statement, right? When somebody wrote a print statement, they were not sure how many parameters will be passed to their function. You can pass n number of parameters to your print function. So those kind of functions are written using this kind of parameters. So let's say sum is equal to 1 or I in value sum plus is equal to 1 and return sum. Now what we are doing, we are getting number of parameters as a sequence, and we are just iterating it using for loop and doing sum and returning the value. So now if I do variable parameters and I can pass any number of parameters now. Let's just print it, otherwise we won't get anything. It is, for example, is equal to I. So now the output of variable argument is 15. But the good thing is there is no limit on the number of parameters that I can pass. It will give me output. So this is the use of variable arguments that you can pass to your functions. Now let's see one more thing, something called pass by value and pass by reference. So when you pass any argument to a function, they are passed two ways. One is passed by value, other is passed by reference. So in simple terms, when you pass something by as passed by value, the value from variable is copied into function. And when you modify it within the function, outside the function, that variable is not impacted. But when something is passed as reference, and if you change it in your function, then it will be changed outside as well. Let's see one example. Let's say I have a list. We are taking a list because lists are mutable. Let's say my list is 34, 156, 100. This is my list. Now I'm writing a function of ref check, reference check, and we can pass the list to it. First thing we'll do is we will check the ID so that we know exactly what object we are changing. Now I'm doing new list.append and I'm adding 5, 6, 7 and then print expand function and new list. So what we are doing is basically let's pass it to our function first. But before doing that, let's print it outside the function. So we know ID of my list and then call the function and finally print. Let's just print it so we know what has happened to the list. What we are doing is we are taking a list, we are printing its ID so that we know what object we are working on, and then we are passing that object to ref list. Again, we are printing the ID. So just to make sure that the ID is changing or not. If it is passed by value, ID will change. If it is passed by reference, ID will not change. Then we are making changes to that list, and then we are printing that list inside the function. And finally, we will be printing it outside the function just to see what happens. So this is our ID outside the function, and then this is the ID inside the function. So the ID is matching. That means that this list is passed as reference, and if something is passed as reference, if you make changes to it, it would be changed outside the function as well. So inside the function, after we appended this 567, this is how our list look like. Now when the function is over, you have a modified list outside the function as well. So In Python, what is happening is everything is passed as reference. So if you make changes into something, a mutable object, then it will change outside the function. It is only true for mutable objects. If it is immutable, for example, this is a string, and if I pass, let me pass ref check x, x is equal to my string. Let's bring it out ID as well. We are just interested in ID. Oops, I think I need to comment this part. Let's not send a list. And what I am doing is the string that we are getting, let's try to change that. So x has this. Now I say new list is equal to new string. Now see what happens. See what is happening is we are defining a string x, we are printing its ID, and we are passing it to ref check. And then let's print that string outside as well. Now let's see what happens. See, this is my ID outside the function. Now inside the function, the ID has changed. So when I'm making any changes inside the function, it is not going to impact outside the function. So if you have mutable objects, and if you are passing them to function, and if you are modifying them, then it would get modified outside as well. Now let's see function as objects. Let's say I have function A. We are simply doing print. This is A. Now what I can say is I can say x is equal to function A, and then if I call x, it will get called. I can even pass function to a function. For example, I'm writing a function B, and it is simply print this B. But this function is picking the parameters, and whatever parameter we are passing to it, it is just taking it as a function and executing it. So now what happens? See, now I have to pass function B to function A. Now let's see what happens. Okay, I'm missing a C. What is happening here is I am calling function A and passing function B as a parameter. And here what I'm doing is I'm printing this is A, and then whatever I'm receiving, I'm just calling it. So it executes both the functions. So this is how you can pass a function as a parameter to function and get it executed. So this is particularly useful in some higher order functions, which we would be looking in the next session. But there is a function, higher order function called filter. Now, if you use a filter, you have to pass two things to it. You have to pass a function and an iterable. So I have to pass a function. So it takes an argument as function and then an iterable. So what it does is it iterates over the iterable and it applies this function on this iterable and provides you an output. So these are the uses of passing function to a function. So your map, filter, reduce. These are some of the higher order functions that works in this manner, which we would look into in detail in the next session. So for now, practice this. And if you have any questions or queries, feel free to drop me a comment and I'll reply you back.